Good evening, everyone. Woo! Yeah, love the energy in here. I'm Esperanza Vacquiz, and I am the live events intern. For those of you joining us for the first time, welcome. KQED is Northern California's PBS NPR member station. KQED Live is our new multi-platform events program that produces screenings, talks, performances, and food tastings based on KQED's mission to inform, inspire, and involve. You all can learn more at kqed.org/live. If we bring value to your everyday life, I encourage you to consider becoming a KQED member. You can find out about how at kqed.org/live. We want to thank the season sponsors that make KQED Live possible: SF MoMA, Berkeley Rep, Comcast Business, and San Francisco Symphony. Our next event is a hip hop game night on Thursday, November 30th, so add it to your calendars, with That's My Word, KQED's ambitious year-long multimedia project exploring the Bay Area's crucial contributions to the evolution of hip-hop. You can compete to win an Amoeba Music gift card, which is really cool. All right, enough with all of that. Tonight's host is Cecilia Phillips, the Check Please Bay Area coordinating producer and on-camera reporter. Cecilia has long been a part of the Bay Area food scene, working under several celebrity chefs and serving as a food tour guide for many years in San Francisco. In her special series, Cecilia Tries It, she scours the Bay Area in search of the off-the-beaten-path spots for exciting, culturally diverse culinary experiences that fans like you can't miss. Please give a warm welcome to Cecilia to the stage.
Hello, how's everyone doing tonight? Yes, that's me behind me right now. Very meta. I don't know why they did that. A different event. But this is me here right now. Thank you so much, SB, for that introduction. Normally, I am the coordinating producer and reporter for a little show that we make here called Check Please Bay Area. They know it. And in that show, I have a segment called Cecilia Tries It, where I get to go out to these off-the-beaten-path places to try amazing food things. But for tonight, I am your host for our KQED's first craft beer event. So we're really excited to have you tonight. Thanks for joining us. And thank you to everyone who's at home watching live. We appreciate it. So first thing is, do we have any cicerones in the house? No. Wow. Okay, this is not starting out well. This is interesting. No cicerones. How many people know what it is? Raise your hand. Okay, so we got a few people who know that. Wearing this shirt, I feel like I'm in a weird New York nightclub trying to tell comedy jokes right now. This is interesting start. Well, what we're gonna do is we're gonna learn more about cicerones. We're gonna learn from some amazing craft brewers about their process, how they got to this point. There's gonna be 6 of them who are gonna be talking about the 5 places that they work, and we're gonna learn about the history of craft beer. We're gonna learn about their stories, how they founded the places that they've started and where they work. We're gonna have an interactive sniff portion tonight where you'll be able to learn a little bit about the ingredients that go into beer. And then we'll ask a few questions from the audience that you'll be able to talk to the brewers. And finally, of course, you're gonna get to taste. Yeah? Sounds good? Let's start by giving a big round of applause to our 6 brewers tonight, and we'll meet them right now. Come on out. Thank you so much for keeping the applause going while they all trickled out here. Thank you. So I'd like to introduce all of them to you. I have Alex Zobel from Armistice in Richmond, the co-founder of that brewery. I have Tim Shawshaw, the co-founder and director and brewer for Cellarmaker in San Francisco, Berkeley, and Oakland. What? You got a fan out there? One. Jen Jordan, head brewer of Laughing Monk in the Bayview. Couple more. We got Luis Castro of Del Cielo Brewery in Martinez. And finally, we have Mario Benjamin and Chaz Hubbard of Hella Coastal Brewing. I originally asked the audience when I walked out if they knew what a cicerone was. I just thought that that would be a good starting spot, you know, but nobody here is a cicerone, so you all are in luck. So
Thank
we're
God.
good. We did have a handful of people who actually did know what that was, and I thought that that would be a good start because I think it gives a sense of the newness of craft brewery, right? And the appreciation and respect that is starting to kind of permeate through maybe not the Bay Area, but the United States in general. And I didn't know what a cicerone was, and it is actually a person who essentially kind of works as like a sommelier. Is that correct? Okay. Are any of you part of this guild of people, if you will? Or do you have any thoughts about it? Alex, I can already see you kind of shaking your head.
I mean, we require all of our front of house staff to do the first level Cicerone just to guarantee a basic level of beer knowledge. I think the Cicerone program is great. I think the beer judge certification program is cheaper and also great. Any beer judges here? Did we? Oh, okay.
One person. Watch
Cool.
what you say.
All right.
That program was started in 2007, so a fairly recent thing, which, as I said, I think that kind of goes in line with what we're going to chat about tonight, right? Which is the craft beer scene and how recent it is, and especially how unique it is here in the Bay Area. So one of the things that I thought we could begin by chatting about, too, was that history, right? And to kind of help us dive into that, Jen, I thought that you would be a great person to just start with a little bit of that background information because of your history. Now, I know that we'll kind of go into you specifically and how you got to where you are, but can we talk about craft beer in the Bay Area specifically? We're incredibly lucky here in the Bay because this is kind of one of the largest regions for craft beer in the United States, with many people attributing Anchor Brewery as one of the first original craft brew places, started in 1896. Do you agree with that sentiment? Do you think that that's kind of like a general understanding and consensus for the craft Bay scene, beer scene?
I do agree with that statement. You know, 1896, almost 130 years ago, the original location wasn't just like 6 blocks from here like it is now, but it, you know, survived Prohibition and inspired so many other brewers in the Bay Area and beyond. And the brewers, Fritz Maytag and all the brewers there, were free-flowing with all their information, everything that they had learned there, and, you know, inspired Sierra Nevada Brewing Company and several other craft breweries in the Bay Area and beyond. And, you know, and that's a long time. Within the Potrero Hill location, it's, you know, I don't remember the exact date because I'm not a historian, I'm a brewer, but I do know that place was in operation for a very long time. And, you know, when I was working there, I worked with brewers who had been brewing there for over 40 years, and that was like where they worked for their whole entire adult life. So,
yeah. Tim, I know you were going to jump in with something, but Jen, you said that there was like a turning point, right? Like that kind of occurred where there was like this moment where we can really officially say like the craft beer scene maybe kind of exploded. And if others want to jump in on that too, like any specific turning point in the like timeline of beer that you all can say like, okay, craft beer, boom. Like now we're kind of moving from a larger scale production. Tim, you want to jump in?
I think that, you know, people got inspired by Sierra Nevada mostly. I'm sure Anchor's part of that too. But then in the like mid to late 80s, that's when you really started to see a lot of breweries starting to pop up in the Bay Area. I started at Marin Brewing Company. They opened up in 1989. They just unfortunately shuttered. But yeah, them and a handful of other breweries popped up. And we've seen kind of waves since then. So there would be a lot. Then it kind of died down and there'd be a lot. I think most of us here are part of like what would be maybe the third wave of breweries, maybe fourth, I'm not sure. But yeah, the history of the Bay Area beer scene is amazing. And we're really lucky to live here and have the quality of beer that we have here. I've traveled all over the world and this country drinking beer, and really what we make in the Bay Area and all of California, the West Coast really, is just phenomenal and high-tier quality stuff.
Right. I think 1982 is when California became the second state in the United States to legalize brew pubs. So places where people could go, grab some food, and get some drinks. So maybe that's kind of part of like that shift, right?
Looks like you know the history better than me.
I did my homework, though I am not actually a beer drinker. I'm hoping one of you can convince me otherwise today. So I'm on it, is basically it. Luis, you were going to add on to that.
Yeah, I was going to add, so I'm originally from Colombia, so I moved here in 2006. So for me, it's like coming from Colombia to the US and going back to that, it's like you just drink like Pilsner, super commercial beers, and then you just come over here. And I remember the first beer that I have, it was like a 90-minute from Stone. I'm like, oh my God, this is just, I've been drinking just super shitty beer for the last 30 years. So for me, it's like, I would say like 15 years is when the craft beer just start making like, especially in California, like you guys, we are spoiled in California. You go everywhere in the US, and the quality that we get especially in the North Bay area is just insanely great. You know, it's like you find like super good IPAs, lagers, any style is really well done too.
Right. Tim, you're already on me about the facts, but I have some more for you. So apparently craft breweries in California outnumber any other state in the United States by like a lot. So California, the census from 2022, we've got 957 craft breweries in California. Does anybody want to, in the audience, take a guess at what state comes after California? Does anybody? They all are wrong. So, does anybody on stage know? No. No, we got time. We can get through all 50.
Minnesota.
Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania comes in at number 2 at 531. Yeah. But that doesn't really kind of give us like a sense, right? So California is massive. Vermont actually is the state that has more breweries per capita at 78. So got quite a bit of places you can drink if you're in Vermont, so you'll be set. But it's to your point, Lise, right? Like we're spoiled here. We have a lot of craft breweries. And I guess I wonder, like, any of you have a sense as to like why in California we're so obsessed?
I mean, we have some of the best climate around. I mean, that's the reason why we have like the wine country. I mean, considering like we can have the best selection of some, you know, of course, Oregon has hops, but California is starting to become more competitive too with the selection of what's available when it comes to malts, hops. I think that's one thing that we're starting to destigmatize what California can bring when it comes to not just wine, but also beer. You know, it's just as, or if not more complex.
Right. And within that, I mean, something that I was hoping that you two could bring up, like, you know, this idea of craft brewing, while that's fairly new, like brewing in general is very old. And that's something that you all make a point of noting, is that the original brewers were from Mesopotamia, right? So this is like a long-standing history of like how beer came to be.
Yeah. What was it? 3900.
3900
Yeah,
BC was when beer was first created in Mesopotamia by a black woman. So, and then that recipe went on to Egypt, where they created the first mass-produced brewery out there. So, you know, it's our point to also make sure to note that, you know, beer is Black history, right, as well, and it's human history, and we've been part of it, you know, and we're going to continue to be part of it, and it's a community effort, and yeah, so it's dope to be part of that history.
So I was thinking that we would get into the process of beer making in a few moments, but and with that, we're going to be actually doing like an interactive sniff portion. I think we talked about. So some of our KQED live folk are actually going to be bringing out some pelletized hops that you brought, Tim. Okay, and that's for everyone to kind of like be able to smell and get a sensory experience.
Yeah, it's a type of hop called Citra, which is a very popular modern hop. It is also the cryo version, which is basically, I think 90 or 80% of the green matter of the hop has been removed cryogenically, and so on the hop or on this pellet, you're getting mostly the oils and aroma fragments of the hop. So I brought that on purpose because it's going to maybe smell better when you're sniffing through perforation on a jar. But you're going to notice a lot of really amazing aromas. It smells kind of like tangerine, mango, some kind of marijuana notes too. And if you sniff really hard, I don't think you're going to sneeze, but people are like sometimes a little sensitive to it.
Okay, so they've got 4 jars that are going to be passed around throughout the audience so that they can be starting to smell one part of what goes into beer making. Before we jump into that, though, is there anything else that you all like love about the history of beer? Like things that you ended up learning along the way that you just found fascinating that, you know, we could talk about that were kind of important to how you decided to like get into the business? Yeah, Alex.
Yeah, I would just add, following up on what Mario was saying about Black history and beer locally. Chaz and I were talking about this earlier, actually. I think in the Bay Area, we really benefited from an amazing homebrew shop owner named Homer out in Albany, or is it technically Berkeley?
Berkeley.
Berkeley, yeah. We still buy hydrometers from him every time we break a hydrometer, which happens like every other week. And yeah, I mean, it's people like Homer that opened up the hobby of craft brewing that also created this sort of interest in the production side that led to, craft brew pubs opening in the 80s. I think there's a pretty direct line between home brewing, the accessibility and the legalization of it, and the craft beer boom that we've been enjoying for the last 3 decades.
Actually, on that note, I think now would be a great time to kind of give a little survey to the audience, right? So we can kind of see where everyone's knowledge base is at. So how many people have never had beer before? All right, this is good. This is a good start. All right. How many people came with somebody else because they love beer and like, you drink it, but like whatever? Okay, this is my crowd. Cool. How many people really have a deep appreciation for beer? They love it and they like to enjoy it. They've never made it themselves. Okay, that's a pretty good majority. How many people have actually dabbled in trying to make their own beer and survived to tell the story? Okay, all right, that's a good number of people who've made their own beer. All right, and then how many of you are considering maybe moving into the beer business, actually taking it further? One person, I saw you, you got scared. Go ahead, raise your hand. There you are, and one over there. And then how many people already have their own business? They're making beer. One person came to check everybody out, just see what's going on. All right, cool. So we've got a sense now of what we're looking at. So a lot of people just have like a deep appreciation for beer. That being said, while they're sniffing, I think now would be a great time for all those people to kind of like talk about the beer making process, yeah? So we talked a little bit about hops, but let's just talk about how it would happen, like how beer making occurs, right? So in its most simplest form, water, yeast, grain, and hops, yeah? I have that right? Okay, great. Talk is done, everyone. We're good. What happens before all of that? Before you start sourcing, you have to have the equipment. So I was thinking that, Alex, you could start us off by talking about just what it would take to make beer and then ingredients, right? Where do you get them? How do you source them? And how does that affect the different types of beer you make?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of the equipment, it's mostly a whole lot of stainless and an SBA loan with a variable rate. That really hurts right now. All those people who raise their hands about wanting to get into it, get out. No, just kidding. The hops is definitely the sexy side that people really want to talk about. Hops are about as close as we get to a terroir raw ingredient in beer. And beer is really interesting because it's somewhere between this sort of industrial manufacturing process that uses commodity goods and a more terroir-driven product like wine. If you get really geeky about it, and if you're lucky, you can get contracts to hand select which specific lot of hops. So not just any old Citra that the broker wants to sell you, but a specific lot from a specific farm. And you could go up to Yakima or Portland, where these brokers have their offices, and huff these hops and decide, what aromatics are speaking to the style of beers you want to brew. We're lucky enough to be able to do that. And then malt, we're so lucky here in the Bay Area because, I think it has something to do with the fact that the food movement got such a great start here. But we have all these micro and craft producers of raw ingredients, including of craft malt. So, Cecilia, you said grain. Well, you start with the barley, right? And then you germinate it, and then you kiln it, and that's how you get the malt, the malted barley that forms the fermentable sugar that is the bulk of the beer. We're so lucky because we have Admiral Maltings in Alameda. Yeah, clap it up. We actually get to make, if we want to do it, we can make beer from fresh malt, which is extremely unusual. I think there were only a handful of malting houses in North America like 10 years ago, and now we have all these micro maltsters cropping up here and in Colorado. It really is the golden age when it comes to these like ultra premium craft ingredients that we get to use. Yeast you're usually getting from a commercial lab. You could do an ambient fermentation and do something wild, something sour. And then water is super boring. If anyone read the water book from the Brewers Association, oh my goodness. I can go off on surface level reservoirs and the variable chemistry, but it's not exciting. But yeah, water is important, and obviously we're thinking about that more and more in the era of climate change and these recurring droughts.
I'm going to have the booth actually restart this awesome video that you brought for us, Tim. So in a moment, we're going to begin from the very beginning of the video, and we'll see a bit of the process in action. And so you all filmed this at Cellarmaker.
We have 2 locations, one in Berkeley and one in Jack London that we just built. And we brew at both of them. Mostly these videos of the process until we get to canning is at our Berkeley location. So here we are milling the grain because the grain is a seed. We need to crack it open. We have to expose the starch that is inside of it. And that starch, as we start to mix it with hot water, there's a certain temperature range where these enzymes are active that break down the starch into sugar, and that's what starch is. It's just long chains of sugar molecules. So here is our brewer, Stefan. He's stirring, making sure everything's nicely evenly mixed. That temperature range, which is, for sugar at least, is around 146 Fahrenheit to 158, 159 or so. Any higher, you're going to deactivate the enzymes, and any lower, you are actually activating other enzymes that some breweries historically will do we call them mash rests, at lower, like we don't do many of these, so my math might be wrong. 112 or so is like a certain acid rest. At 130 is for protein, and we're just breaking things down. And traditionally they did this because the malt wasn't as modified, as they say. We hadn't perfected the malting process, but we're really good at it now. So any malt you buy today, you just mix with hot water, you get your sugar. We transfer that liquid, that sugary liquid, which is called wort, over to our kettle for boiling. What's left over is what you're seeing right now is the spent grain, so it's pretty dry at this point. We've extracted as much sugar as we can. And here's Cass. We're literally pulling it out of the mash tun, which is the first vessel we go into, and that grain is being sent to ranchers locally who come pick it up, and they're going to feed it to their cattle. Really tasty cattle. So after we grain out, we've transferred our wort to our kettle. We're going to start to boil that wort, and we're going to add in hops at this point. Now, hops added at the beginning of our boil are going to give us bitterness, and hops at the end of the boil don't give us much bitterness because the boiling process creates that bitterness. And then suddenly you're retaining more of the aroma and flavor, much more of the aroma, really, of the hops because you're not boiling that off. Here we are at like the beginning of the transfer of the wort into the kettle. You can see that there. And we will do that for about an hour to 2 hours, depending on what's happening, to collect as much as you need. So a big brewery will collect lots of it in an hour and a half. A small brewery will collect a very small amount in an hour and a half. This part of the video just kind of jumps to canning, but to finish up the process, we boil. That's going to sterilize the wort. It's going to also create different flavor compounds. And then we basically chill that down, send it to a tank, and in that tank is waiting the yeast. And the yeast will start its fermentation, which I think Jen might talk about.
Sure. I'm a big fan of yeast. It's like the only living thing, like, you, Alex was saying, like, the hops is the sexy part of beer. Well, I think it's yeast because it's alive. And it's the only thing, I mean, it's like, it's what's actually making the beer. Like as brewers, we like to think that we're the ones making the beer, but we're actually not. The yeast is doing it, and it's our job to feed them. It's our job to provide the right temperature and the right food for them so that they can munch through that sugar. And while they're eating that sugar at the perfect temperature that they want to be at, they're basically creating alcohol and carbon dioxide and a lot of other flavors that sometimes fruity flavors, sometimes spicy flavors. It all just depends on what kind of yeast you're putting in there. And I would venture to say and feel strongly that the yeast that you select to brew with and the temperature that you ferment at is the biggest determining factor of what beer style you're actually making. And so I just, big shout out to the yeast. Some people, without it, I guess we'd be making sour beers all the time. And that's delicious, but it's a different style, and a lot of people love them. I do too, but the brewers have a specific sugar content and pH level that they want to be in their finished beer. They have ideas about clarity and carbonation and all kinds of flavors. And I think Luis is going to talk about finishing up beers, putting on the finishing touches, and getting them ready for drinking.
Yeah, so you guys just left the easy part for me. So basically, like, once you get the wort into, like they were saying, the wort into the fermenter, produce the alcohol, and then we start working on getting the beer ready. If it's an IPA, then we start selecting, okay, what kind of hops we're gonna dry hop with, if it's a sour, if we're gonna add some fruit, or if we're gonna add some spices, depending on the type of the beer that we're making. And then after that, we basically just, after X amount of days, brewers do it in different ways. You can get like first dry hopping, second dry hopping, or if you add in the fruits, then that's why you see the fermenters. They have this conical form. Then it's gonna help you to get all the yeast at the bottom. A lot of the time, we reuse the yeast for the next batches. Something cool about the industry is that sometimes we share the yeast with other breweries, and then we start like cold crushing the beer, getting ready, conditioning, carbonating the beer, checking our DOs, making sure that it's ready for kegging, and it goes into canning, and I think that's where you guys come in.
Oh, wait, I have a question.
Yes.
I'm going to interrupt here. So how long, is there a window of time where a brewer would ferment beer and it's just, that's the window? You wouldn't go beyond it? Is there a certain frame of time for the fermentation? I don't know.
Well,
Do you have the answer?
I would say for most of us here, we're trying to get the beer as quick as possible because we need the beer to go out of the market. We only, like in our case, we only have 9 fermenters, so for us, like time on that beer sitting on the fermenter is for us like getting the beer out. So I would say like an ale normally from brew to canning, you probably get it like in 2 weeks, a little bit longer if you can. Obviously lagers, lagers are fermented at lower temperature, and then you normally let that beer sit cold for at least 3 to 6 weeks. Again, like depending on how much you can weigh on the beer. Sometimes you have to rush a little bit more, but again, like rushing doesn't mean that the quality is going to be lower. We just have to get the beer out of the fermenter to get another one right there.
Right, yeah. Right. To keep the process going. So the booth is going to get the next video going, which you all brought from Hella Coastal here, and this is more of the canning process. So now we've got our finished beer. Then what do you all do?
Yeah. So I have to say that this is something that, I mean, we literally, before we even got here, we camped this up today. And this is one of our flagship stouts that we do that's seasonal. And usually what we do is, making sure everything is dialed in, of course, touching up upon the DO levels and making sure that we have a very efficient packing run. But the main thing we both think about is, okay, what accounts can we make sure that this gets to?
Yeah.
And considering that we don't have a big distribution chain, we're doing self-distro. So we're doing it on a very lower level, kind of like grassroots, hitting the ground running and hitting those accounts.
Yeah.
That really, that we're trying to build a repertoire and also get to the level that a lot of the other breweries that are here that we're trying to get to.
So what is the canning process like? First of all, I mean, how do you choose between like what beer is going to go in a can versus what's going to be going in a keg? Like, do you make those distinctions? Like, it's obviously has to do with who's going to be buying it, right? But what is the process of getting it into their hands, right?
Yeah, so for us, we're basically self-distribution. So we can most of our beer so we can get it out to as many people. So it's kind of like a business card. We want to get out there. We have our QR code on it. We try to make like really nice artwork that kind of reflects our culture and everything. So we do mostly cans, and then we do probably like 40% of it in draft to like some key accounts who've been supporting us. One thing also I want to mention as far as like the technology or whatever is, in the beginning phase, oxygen is really important for your beer, right? Like Jen was saying, it's a yeast is living and it needs to breathe and have oxygen to produce alcohol. That's the only time you want oxygen involved in the process. After that, you can get your beer oxygenated or, it can start degrading. And so you probably saw in the canning video, there were two prongs that kind of came down into the can. One is pumping CO2 in to purge the can because those cans are just coming off of a pallet. So if we just threw beer in there, there's oxygen in there, it's going to mess the beer up by the time it hits you. So we want it to be as fresh as possible. So it's purging that and then fills it from the bottom with the beer, caps it, rinses it, labels it, and then you drink it.
There we go. That's the process. Just as easy as that. Okay, well, I thought it would be great to kind of learn a bit more about each of you and how you got into the journey that you got into and where you're at today. Alex, you were the one who won out between you and your brother on who was going to be here today because you guys didn't have anything else going on. So you all are actually opening up a second location is what's happening. So I would love to know more about how you all started Armistice. You've been in the business for about 8 years now, and you have a really interesting origin story about how you all got started in this. You want to kind of tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So Armistice was started by me and my brother, Gregory. Beer was our armistice. Armistice means ceasefire, and it's really what saved our relationship. And there's many examples of this in history. Do y'all remember the beer summit in the Obama era? Anyone? No? Feeling like an old millennial. Yeah, we actually, Gregory and I grew up in separate households. I grew up with our dad in Concord. He grew up with our mom in Napa. I'm 5 years older than him, so I hustled him through the shitty beer drinking phase as quickly as possible. And we just really connected over beer after a kind of tumultuous, split custody upbringing. And we ended up brewing beer together because Gregory got me a homebrew kit when I was in grad school down at UCLA, and he was in the film industry down there in LA as well. And we just fell in love with the hobby together. And we ended up having to move back to our mom's house in Napa. She was sick at the time, and homebrewing was honestly like a lifeline for us. It kept us pretty sane during the hellscape of caregiving, which I'm sure many of you know about. After mom passed, we used the life insurance money as collateral on a small business loan. Variable rates, don't forget that, everyone. Very important. And we ended up starting Armistice because we really believed in, the power of beer to bring people and communities together. Honestly, we weren't capitalized well enough to be able to do a big packaging, distributing brewery. So there was no other option for us other than doing a small tap room oriented brewery. But it also just kind of fit with like our sort of philosophy on why beer and public houses And these sort of third spaces are important. And we were lucky enough to find a spot that we could afford in Richmond. And Richmond has been just a great home for us. And yes, as you said, we just opened a second location in Napa, which for Gregory, for sure, feels like a homecoming. For me, it's like seeing all these old dudes from our homebrew club again, which we're happy about, of course, but Gregory likes it more.
I'm going to ask each of you this question, but now that you've kind of told us a little bit more about your story, this is going to be controversial, but I'd love to know, do you remember the first time you tried beer? Now, if that question's going to get you in trouble, then don't answer it, but do you remember like your first experience with beer?
Everyone on stage here knows that the ABC is underfunded and cannot do any enforcement. So I'm not risking anything by answering this question. It was for sure with my like German Grandpa Zobel, you know, potato chips and Old Milwaukee or something. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Tim, so you are the co-founder and have started Cellarmaker as the director of brewing. You're the director of brewing and the co-founder. You started in 2013, and you all really focus on making sure that you're doing new beers every week, which is really exciting. But your story definitely started a little bit differently. You were a classically trained saxophone player?
Yes.
That is a big jump, though. I mean, saxophone and beer, that's a good combo. Maybe.
Yes, I started playing saxophone at, I think, age 10, maybe 9, and that was kind of my first love. Beer is now my love currently, and yeah, I was pretty good at it. I ended up going to the conservatory, New England Conservatory of Music in Boston, where I got my bachelor's in saxophone performance, which is, yes, a real thing. Classical saxophone performance. I don't play jazz, no. But I realized shortly after getting to college that my passion for saxophone was not really for like a career in saxophone. So I had started drinking beer many years before. My brother's 12 years older than me, and he has Epicurean tastes, I guess. So he introduced me to craft beer at a pretty young age. So I was drinking it much younger than I think some people do. Anyways, I got really into beer. I met kids at college who were home brewing, who are also into beer. I didn't home brew, but they showed me how. And right away, I was like, this is something that I could do forever. I graduated, and I ended up getting a job at Sam Adams in Boston as a tour guide. I was doing tours in Sam Adams. So if you ever went to Sam Adams in Jamaica Plain, Boston, 2008 or so, you might have gone on a tour for me. But what was great about that was I was surrounded by beer all the time. I was surrounded by people who were passionate about it and knew a lot about it, and I could pick their brain constantly. And they had resources there. They had a little library that I could pull books from and read. And I really just became a deep nerd on history and production. If you want to read an amazing book, by the way, that really inspired me, The Brewmaster's Table by Garrett Oliver is a book about beer and food, but really it's just this like history that's beautiful, and he talks about so many different beer styles and producers over the years in different countries. I wanted to make beer. I wanted to do it professionally at this point. Sam Adams wouldn't hire me as a brewer. There was not many breweries in Massachusetts at that time. It's very different now. So the brewers, who a lot of them were actually from the Bay Area, convinced me to move out here and try, with their recommendation, try to get a job. I was lucky enough to do that. I didn't really have a great plan, but I just packed up my car and went, and I got a job at Marin Brewing Company. I worked there for 4.5 years. In that time, I met my wife, Kelly, who is one of my business partners, and Connor, who's our other business partner, and we started Cellarmaker in 2013. And you mentioned, like, we make a lot of different beers. At the time, that wasn't the way things were, that you would make 5 beers all year long and then have a couple of seasonals that change in. I don't think we repeated a beer for 60 batches, maybe once or something like that. We're making different IPAs, pale ales, stouts, porters, anything, honestly. We were the first brewery to open up in San Francisco in like 12 years. And then like the explosion happened right around then and after us. We had a nice little small tasting room in Soma, and since then we have closed that location, but we have we built a brewery in Jack London Square We took over a existing brewery called the Rare Barrel in Berkeley. So we still make the Rare Barrel sour beers, and we make our own beer there. And I think in 2019, we opened Cellarmaker House of Pizza in Bernal Heights, where we make Detroit-style pizza. And then we do that at the Jack London Square location too now.
And 15 years at that is how long you've been kind of in the business making beer.
About 15.
And closely following behind at 11 years. Can I call you Sister Jen? Is that okay? Yeah. I mean, I hear that Laughing Monk Brewery, you guys are all really into the branding. So that's what it says on the website, Sister Jen.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
All right, cool.
Do you want to know about my first beer? I totally remember it.
You do? Tell me.
Oh, yeah. So I was probably like 5 years old. And I remember it was a Sunday, and this might have happened multiple times, but I have a really good memory of it. It's like my dad's watching football, and he's in a recliner, and he's like this. And he's like, Jen, will you go get me a beer? And I was like, oh, yeah. This could be the most important thing I do all day, because I'm 4 or 5 or something like that. So I go to the fridge, and I get it, and then I'm like, here, Dad. And he was like, well, can you open it for me? And I was like, oh, well, sure, I'll try. And, my little fingers open it up. And he's laying back like this. And he's like, well, could you take the first sip? Because if you don't, then I'm just going to spill it down the front of myself. Because he's in a recliner. And I was like, okay, well, why not, And I did it. And I was like, wow, this is really, this is important.
Yeah. And
this is really a good time with Dad.
That's what started it all.
And it did happen more than once, but it was only the first sip.
Yeah, just one.
Only on Sunday.
We do not condone underage drinking, especially if it comes
I turned out okay.
under 6 years old. Okay.
But then, besides all that, I just totally remember all that.
Yeah.
But
good memory, bonding with.
I don't know, and then fast forward a little bit.
Yeah.
I
You were in
worked
the school system.
Yeah, I worked in the San Francisco Unified School District for about 15 years, and during that time, I fell in love with beer, naturally, and then
Inspiring the youth. Okay.
And then, so I fell in love with beer, and this was also a time when this craft beer boom was starting to happen in the Bay Area, and I started exploring different beer styles, became a home brewer, and then at some point, I was just like, you know what? I want to do this. I was doing it every weekend, but I'm like, I want to do this every day. And so I just applied for a job at Anchor Brewing Company and got a packaging position, and this is in 2013, right when you were starting your deal up. And a brewing position came up there, and I almost thought, oh, I shouldn't apply for this because I haven't put in enough time, and it would be disrespectful to apply, But my partner told me, you know what, you really should apply. Like, other people with much less experience and much less knowledge would totally throw their hat in the ring, You should do it. Just because there's 2 things on that list you haven't done, just apply and go and do it. And I did. And so I became a brewer at Anchor Brewing Company, and I was the first woman to be hired as a brewer at Anchor Brewing Company, which is a little bit odd considering the long history, but it happened. It happened, and at first I was super proud about that, but then I thought, why did that take so long? And that's just the way sometimes things roll out. But anyway, I brewed there for a while, and then a lot of things happened at Anchor, and a lot of really great things, but there were a lot of challenges, and then I really started thinking I need to go back and think about my home brewing history, and I really wanted to work at a small brewery again where I was just really involved from the beginning, from conceptualizing a beer, the inspiration for a beer. It could be a person, a place, an idea, a cause, recipe development, and just be involved in the process from beginning to end, which is harder to do when you're working in a big production facility, and Laughing Monk is not that. It's kind of like, I haven't really looked at the numbers compared to what other breweries or folks here are producing, but I really enjoy working at Laughing Monk just because I feel super involved, super included in all parts of the process, and it's just an open and welcoming environment as an employee, but I think also for consumers, lighthearted, good beer, fun.
And that's what you want. And you're in a very unique part of San Francisco in the Bayview as well. It's
Yeah.
all about artists and
Yeah.
creatives in that area.
Yeah, we're on 3rd Street. Egbert is the cross street, so just take the T line, come down and see us.
Yeah. Moving into our next brewer, Del Cielo. So Luis Castro, you're the owner and head brewer in Martinez, and the name alone is really unique and interesting. So it's very heavenly. That's the connection there? Was like the idea?
For us, it's just like we take like nothing religious about the name. It's more like the process that we do. All of our ingredients, we try to make the best quality beer. Use the freshest ingredients. Try to come out with a lot of the sours that we do. We bring the fruits from. We have the distributor that brings the fruits from Colombia. So we try to be connected to my home country. So that's kind of what the name comes from too.
Right. So your heritage is really important to you, as well as just kind of incorporating those flavors from your background. You run the business with your wife. You mentioned you're Colombian and she's from Puerto Rico.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically my background is in finance. So I was in finance for 20 years. Super exciting. No. No. So I moved to the U.S. to do an MBA in finance, and basically I was planning to go back to Colombia, and I got an internship, and after couple of weeks, my boss says I'll give you a full-time position if you stay. So I stay. We met in Ohio, so a Colombian and a Puerto Rico in Ohio, that's not the best way to do it. So we decided to move to California. That was in 2011. When we moved to California, when we were in Ohio, we were drinking beer, super excited about the beers. But then when you move to California, I'm like, oh my God, this is a game changer. We used to go to every single brewery almost every weekend. And then when we were going to our friend's house, I would bring 2 6-packs, but every beer is different. So I'm like, hey, dude, I brought 12 beers. Why don't we just sit down and talk about the beers? My friends I just want to drink the beer. Dude, will you shut up? And so one year for my birthday, they just give me a gift certificate for More Beer, which is our homebrew shop close to our house. So they were after me you got a homebrew, you got a homebrew, I don't want to do that. It's too messy. I'm super OCD. I'm I don't want a mess in my house. So they gave me one. I'm now I got to do something. So we make our first batch together. From there, we just went for I just went for 1 beer a month, 2 beers a month, 1 beer a week. It got to a point I have more beer that I can drink by myself. So we started inviting friends, and I remember it was every other Friday, 10 friends at our house. Okay, guys, I have 2 kegs. We have to kill these 2 kegs right now.
Wow.
Because I got another batch that I gotta move into the kegs. So I remember the girlfriends and the wives start complaining about it, so we invite them too, and then friends start inviting too. Our last beer release that we have at our house on a townhome, it was in December. We have to turn on the AC and open the windows because it was too hot. We had 65 people at our house.
Oh my gosh.
Obviously, we always invite the neighbors next to our house, so they're always invited. Basically, I just fall in love with beer and with the community, pretty much.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that one of the things that you focus in on is doing beer with a purpose. One of your taglines is Mi casa es su casa. And what I love about this diverse panel is that we were able to find a good sampling of different types of people who are in this business. This is not representative necessarily of what the beer community is like. And for you represent part of 2% of people in the United States. 2% of the population in the United States from Latin-owned brewer. What is that like? How has that affected the way that you move in this business? What does it mean to you to be able to do this?
For us, it's just making sure that we send our message. We involved with so many nonprofits from schools. We work with a nonprofit that is called Bike Project, and all they do is bike. Kids on bikes. We've been trying to raise funds for the last 2 years to build a bike park for kids in Contra Costa. So we release the beer every twice a year. we love dogs, so any way that we can have, we normally have like every couple months we have like an adoption drive at the brewery, and we're involved on that. We high schools, we normally do backpacks full of school supplies for kids that cannot afford them, and we normally try to target that to the Hispanic community. So it's just going back to where I come from, you know? Yeah.
Do you remember your first beer?
I do. Well, actually, I don't.
That makes more sense, yeah.
So in Colombia, like, you normally don't buy a 4-pack or a 6-pack, you buy a 30 case. You know, you go to a store and they sell you basically a square with 30 bottles. So I remember, like, I was going, my uncle, he used to drink a lot of beer, so I was always, like you, open it for him, serve him a glass, but his glass was every time that I served the beer for him, it was like getting smaller and smaller, like the amount of beer that he was getting on the glass. So there's a beer that is called Águila, which is a Colombian, just imagine like Coors Light. So that was kind of the first time that I got drunk, like at 7 or 8. Yeah, it was a party.
I wasn't drunk when I
Oh,
taking
I
the
was.
first sip
Big
of my
distinction
dad's
there.
beer.
Okay.
Just wanted to throw that out there.
They found me under the table sleeping.
Sleeping. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. And Hella Coastal. So we're super excited to have you both here. The two of you are co-founders and co-owners. Mario and Chaz, you all, so Mario, I know you said you have about 3 years in the business. Would you say roughly around the same amount?
Like commercially, yeah.
Commercial. And can you tell me a little bit about how you all got started with your story together? It's super unique and also representative of 1% of black brewers in the United States.
It's not even 1%. Out of the United States, it's like over 9,500, and we're not even at. No, it's a little bit higher now, but it's about 90 that are black owned. So we're not even at 1% yet. But how we met though was through my brother-in-law actually, because Chaz and my brother-in-law Salvador, which I'm married to his sister now. I met through them, and we just hit it off. And the one thing about this is beer is community, and that's what brought us together, essentially. Knowing that this is like one of the markets that's not really highly competitive, and we can share resources and share things together, and do it in a way where we can essentially make things and be competitive, friendly competition, which when I met Chaz, he was doing it first, and it was more or less like one of those things like, oh, he making something, okay, I'm gonna make something, but it was like, who can make the better shitty beer? And I know there's something that Chaz, like, yeah, I was making some good beer. But if you want to touch upon like some of the origin stories too, man.
I'll say my beer or fermentation experience started with school as well, but it was high school. I was in high school, so I was in a biology class and learned about fermentation. It was at Berkeley High, class of 2000. If anybody was there, no.
One person. That's your classmate.
Hey. Okay. So we learned fermentation, and that's kind of like when I fell in love with like creating something out of nothing, like adding yeast to like sugar, and then our teacher walking out and putting Austin Powers on and letting us dump everything down the drain. So we had some fun with that. And then it was home brewing after that for me. So about 5 years later, got into home brewing at Oak Barrel, met Homer, and really fell in love with like craft beer. But I'd say my start was probably like everybody else's start, is like having craft beer. And when you first have it, you're like, oh, this is delicious. And then as brewers, we're like, how do I make this, and how do I make it better, and how do I make something that I really want when you taste it? So Did that for a minute, and
It's
then
that friendly competition. Like,
Yeah.
oh man, I think I can do this a little bit better.
yeah. And then that's when Mario and I found out he had a homebrew kit, and he was
Yeah,
brewing.
Bed Bath & Beyond. Shout out to my wife that got me that little that little kit.
Yeah.
But it was because of Chaz too. I got introduced to Oak Barrel, and to be honest with you, I was like one of those ones that drink craft beer. I love going to Pyramid and Triple Rock and all these other places that were around the bay. Of course, Lagunitas, and I can keep naming Anchor. But it was just one of those things of really knowing the complexity of what goes into it and how you can destigmatize what beer is. Because my first experience was also young. And my grandmother's very Southern, and I was a very hyperactive kid. And it was these little Budweisers that were about this big. They were half cans. And I remember I thought it was adult soda, so I just wanted to try it. She's like, yeah, try it. And then next thing you know, I remember waking up. It was during a family party, and it was Budweiser. That was my
first too.
Okay, note to self, I will not ask that question if we do another alcohol-based event.
Hey, in the 80s, it was I think it was
different-
okay.
different
It's like go to sleep.
Okay, so we are getting close to wrapping up with the time here, but I do have a couple questions, and I know that we have a few questions that I believe have been sourced from the audience. So while they get those questions, I'm going to ask some of my own that any of you can kind of jump in and talk to me about. I mean, the first thing is representation, right? I think that I'd love to just start there. We just kind of talked about the growing numbers, hopefully, of people who are entering into this field in a field that's 94% white, right? What do you hope to see for the future, and what do you hope that your representation does for the community? For that, I'm posing that to pretty much everybody. So.
I think the thing is, if you don't mind me just chiming in.
You mentioned also alternating proprietorship, right?
So that was the thing that was very important to us. We didn't have the capital to really start off, and we wanted to do it in a way that is accessible to anyone to want to get into the industry. And considering how we had these grassroots beginnings from craft brewing and doing home brewing, we felt it was very important for us to be part of this culture that's welcoming when it comes to being in the community as far as the drinkers, but also giving our own image within a space that we can create on our own and make it be inclusive and make sure that it's also equitable when it comes to us not having that professional knowledge that a lot of other people will have, but we know that we love the outcome of when it comes to enjoying something and meeting someone in this space where we're filled within a group where it's so diverse. We want to be part of that. And considering the history of where beer comes from, it's it just makes sense for us to be part of this. And it's been nothing but open arms. A lot of people like Tim, we met Tim, Louise. Tim, we've done some things, and he's been able to really just open his books. It's not one of those things we're going to close everything up and we'd be safeguarded with our secrets. It's been one of those things that, no, this is for everybody, and we feel welcome.
Yeah.
And that's the main thing.
You were participants recently in the People's Beer Fest, is that correct? 30 black brewers that came together for an event?
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. That was up in Sacramento. I also wanted to say real quick, it was when we first started out, we were beer drinkers, so we would go to breweries because we love craft beer, and we didn't see ourselves in those spaces, so it felt pretty awkward, So we were thinking of ideas let's do a flash mob and just bring all our homies and then make it feel like our space, you know what I'm saying? And we just go in, drink a bunch of good beer, have a good time. But it was more than just that, being there as consumers, so we wanted to really get in the space, and that's the real diversity, equity, inclusion, right? Is owning the space and creating some capital out of it, creating some jobs, and creating a space that's for us, by us, and for all allies included. So what People's Beer Fest is doing is showing that Black people are in beer, and that there's like 90 different breweries within the country, and we're all supportive of each other. We've met so many people through Instagram. That's like one of the biggest platforms where we've met like so many different Black-owned breweries, influencers who just have our support and our back, and want to see us thrive, so we can create a dent in this market.
Right. Luis, do you want to kind of jump on that as well?
Yeah, for us, the key part is, like our mentality is at El Cielo, when you come to our tap room, literally it's an extension of our house. It's mi casa es tu casa. That's why our house got too small for the amount of people that we wanted to have and the beer that we wanted to have. But again, like we want to still connect it to a community, those things that we care, those things that we just thinking like things that are going to make the world better, helping those kids that they cannot go to school and have the school supplies, or getting involved with things. You got to start from the bottom to be able to make changes in the community. But again, like the beer industry is a community that I don't think any industry like this, like we support each other. If somebody asks me, hey, what's the recipe for this? I totally open my recipes, like this is what I do. This is the process. This is exactly what I do. If you want to make something similar, or if you want to make the same, feel free. But most of the time, like breweries, they put their own twist. That's why we're so spoiled to be here. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that kind of just answers this really awesome question that I'm going to then piggyback on to pose to others, which is, I've spent time on the East Coast, and prior to moving to San Francisco, I noticed that generally craft beer attracts a homogenous demographic. Why do you think this is, and how can well-established institutions change it? I mean, I'm going to pose that question partially to you, Jen. I mean, you were one of the first head brewers to be hired by Anchor. And what are ways that these places can change? Alex, you and I also talked about how the tap room area is kind of a unique space for a woman to be in, and that it's a very small demographic of people who are in there. What can be done? Do you see changes happening, and what are ways that we can support it?
I see changes happening, and I think like the initial part of the question about why is it like that? Why is it just, and we can just say it, it's like white men, like in a lot of these spaces, not so much here in the Bay Area, but in other places, but still here in the Bay Area. Like I don't think that the people that you see in the tap rooms definitely doesn't represent the demographics in ethnicity of like who's here in the Bay Area.
And who's drinking beer.
And who's drinking beer. So I think part of it is, historically part of it is beer marketing. Like this is for you and this is not for you, and that's a problem. But I think some things that are changing are coming through nonprofit organizations that are specifically focused on nonprofit organizations are specifically focused on education and inspiration of underrepresented communities in craft beer. And I could name like 6 of them, but I don't think it's necessary. But if anybody's out there looking to make a donation to make craft beer a more diverse, equitable, just, and inclusive place, and want to take some action, but you're not sure how to take some action, like do some research about it. It's out there. There's also a lot of entrepreneurs that are looking for funding so they can do their thing. And I think that is like maybe skip the nonprofit organization and go directly to those who need the funding, because it's the startup, not the once you're going, you're going. It's the startup that's the barrier.
Yeah. Alex, did you want to jump on that too, and how you've maybe seen things changing, or maybe what you hope for, or maybe even what you hope to represent for anybody who's trying to get into the business?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough question. I don't have any easy answers on this one. You opened this whole show talking about how craft beer has, has reached a new level of respect, and often respect travels with class and a certain price point. And, honestly, I think Jen's absolutely right. I think a lot of it was marketing, and I think the marketers were right because they were seeing that, in the mid-century, the people that were drinking beer were white men. And now that there's a higher price point, quote unquote, classier beverage, those are also still the same people that can afford that. So it was kind of like a pipeline. It's tough. I mean, our home is in Richmond, and it's never going to leave Richmond. And there is a real ceiling on what people will pay for craft beer there. And, while we're all as an industry reaching for more respect, like, I'm not trying to make us whine, like I want this to be a democratic beverage that's like within reach for most people. And we all could probably go off for quite a bit of time about inflation and all the pressures that we feel. But the reality is, at our scale, which is tiny, like we could all like get in a line about like who has the most production here, like from here to here, but we are so small compared to the Modelo's of the world, right? And that's like Modelo has a very diverse clientele. I would love for us to be there, but frankly, it's going to take policy to get us there. Like there's no way we're going to be able to compete with as widely accessible of a product as a Modelo. So.
Yeah, and I think that part of that is helping to explain to people and understand, as with everything that we're dealing with, the rising costs, right, and what's associated with that, but what you're getting out of that product. And that's why you all are doing what you do, craft beer. It's different, right? Tim, do you want to kind of chat about like why the prices are what they are? I mean, we know that the cost of everything's going up, but in a nutshell, like what is it that like really drives home that price point? And why should people pay for it?
Well, beer is actually still an affordable beverage to some degree, right? In many ways, it's the beverage that like it's still cheaper than a craft cocktail and a lot of wine. The price has gone up. I think that's just because there's a couple of factors. I think people started to think you could get rich making beer, seeing what was happening over the past 10 years and the explosion of craft beer. And a lot of people got into beer for the wrong reasons and helped drive prices up. But there's also a factor of just like, we know that if beer is successful and we can get a certain price point from the beer, we can pay our people better, we can have better run companies, we can have better run experiences for you. Beer being the cheap beverage is kind of, Alex said, she doesn't want to create something really fancy about beer, but we need to do it a little bit to get the idea across that beer is not just the $2 Budweiser that you go buy at the bar. Craft beer is created and run by people that are your neighbors. These are businesses that are owned by people you know. I implore you to think about going to a brewery first to buy your beer instead of going to the corner store. I mean, we need the corner stores too, absolutely. But if you want to see craft beer survive, it's in a little weird point right now. A lot of breweries are closing, and we desperately need folks like yourselves to spread the word and evangelize your friends and come and drink craft beer in the spots that it's made. We are... we're on a real roller coaster ride right now, and so we have to keep the prices up a little bit. We need to pay these bills. We need to pay the variable rates. I'm very well aware of that right now too. And so when you see that $10 pint of beer, which 5 years ago sounded crazy, please don't scoff at it. There's a reason why it costs that much.
And with that, I'm assuming that most people are quite thirsty at this point. Is that true? Okay, well, I'm going to crack open a cold one here that I happen to have on stage and make everybody jealous. This is the time where I'm hoping that the booth can actually put up some of the awesome artwork that you all have brought, and this awesome cat that's drinking a beer. So each of you have actually brought 2 beers. For people to taste while they mosey to the lobby once we're all done here. So what I'm hoping quickly as we're wrapping up so that the beer doesn't get super warm that's out there is that each of you can talk about the name of the beer that you've brought, the type, and the flavor profiles that they're going to get when they taste it. So Alex, this is your beer. Can you start by telling us what you brought for people to try?
Absolutely. Tiki Town, it's basically Jamba Juice. It's as much fruit as you can put in a beer and still call it beer. It's fantastic. You're going to love it. Give it to all your friends who don't think they like beer, because they're going to like this.
And did you brought a second one as well?
We did. We brought Green New Zealand, which was just up on the screen. It's probably the previous slide. Green New Zealand, a hazy New Zealand hopped IPA. We won a medal at Great American Beer Festival for this one. Super delicious. I mean, this is the go-to. You all are going to love it. That's all I can say.
I'm going to go ahead and ask you one more question that was asked by the audience, because now's the perfect time, and I'll pose it to all of you if you have a really great answer, because we're running low, but what is the craziest beer that you've brewed and liked? Because you may have made some beers that you brewed and didn't care for, but what did you do that was wild that you liked? Anybody have something? I mean, the tiki one sounds pretty wild. Go ahead, I hear some rumbling.
We have one right now that's it is really splitting the crowd, but I like it. It's a bourbon barrel-aged imperial stout that we also added fresh banana, strawberry, and vanilla into.
Oh, wow.
It's pretty wild. I like it, but I can see why people are just like, what the hell is this?
Beer and breakfast together. Okay. Speaking of which, what were your two beers that you've brought with you from Cellarmaker?
So the first one is Hop Making Sense, which is a West Coast pale ale, dry and a little bit bitter and very aromatic from all the hops we use, which we spend a lot of time selecting and putting our effort into. That's just great if you just want something easy drinking. And then we brought on the other side of the spectrum, Double Coffee, Imperial Coffee and Cigarettes, 10.5% alcohol. If you have an adversity to caffeine, maybe stay away from this one. There is a lot of coffee, and there's probably about a cup of coffee worth in a pint.
Is there any nicotine or?
No nicotine. That's a great question. We're not allowed to do that, and I wouldn't do it in the first place.
Okay.
But yeah, no, it's got a little bit of smoked malts in there, and so it has a little smoky kick in the background, just a little bit, just to add some complexity.
Okay, cool. I'm going to ask you one question as well, because this one's a good one that I actually was curious about. Hopefully you can do this quickly. I'm sure you could write a whole novel on this, but why did West Coast beer become so known for being like IPA focused? Why did IPA become just like the thing out here?
I think it has to do with proximity to where we grow these hops. Washington and Oregon, but mainly Washington has grown. I mean, the hops were grown all over the country, New York and whatnot, for many years until Prohibition kind of squashed all that. But lately, Washington grows some of the greatest hops in the world, very aromatic, beautiful hops. And when the hop like Cascade came out, Anchor, I believe, made the first IPA with that. Sierra came out with the pale ale. It's all Cascade, and that was just like this moment where West Coast breweries, stemming from the influence of Sierra, I think, just exploded and started focusing on hops because it's unique and they're different and they're really fucking awesome.
Awesome. Okay, great note to end on. All right. And for your beers, Jen, what did you bring?
We
make sure I get the slide up too.
From Laughing Monk brought, that's it right there, Holy Ghost Pilsner, German style Pilsner. It's like a beer flavored beer. And so traditional German hops and cold fermented, and so it's like a cracker with a little bit of flowers on it.
Mm-hmm.
You'll love it. And then the other one is called Last Rites. It's a rye IPA, and there's a little bit of spice from the rye. It's like 15% rye, but the rest is a basic 2-row malt, and so the hops are kind of resinous. I would say pine and maybe a little bit dank. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that beer too.
Yeah. And I mean, this was part of what I was trying to joke around about the marketing earlier. So Laughing Monk, right? Like you guys kind of specialize mostly in like Belgian beer. You do different styles, but...
Well, I mean, Laughing Monk was founded with the idea of focusing on Belgian beers, which was like a really exciting thing for everybody was exploring Belgian beers, in 2015, 2016.
Right.
But then hops was just like, no, okay. Belgian beers aren't like hop bomb beers, and everybody wanted the hops, and so, we make the IPAs too.
Yeah. But is it true that the name partially came from the idea that there would be monks who would go and be fasting, and the only thing that they could have to curb their hunger would be beer?
Yeah, I guess it was their food.
They kind of skirted the whole fasting thing and had beer. So that's why
Right.
the monk is laughing, right?
Yeah, the monk is laughing because the monk is drunk.
Yeah, okay. All right, awesome. All right, and so from you, Luis, what beers did you bring? Oh, this is the one that I got. Okay.
Yeah, be
yay.
careful with that.
Oh. Give it a taste. All right.
So yeah, this is our, actually we just got bronze at JBF this year. This is our double IPA, crazy loaded with Mosaic, Idaho 7, and Centennial. Again, like this is going back to why the California beer is amazing. We select the best hops that we can get, and obviously like going back to that West Coast, like super dry, but at the same time well-balanced double IPA without you getting the burn from the alcohol. That's the first one that we brought. And then the second one that we brought, this is the one that I just finished a long time ago. This is our 3.8% light Mexican lager. It's called Vato Loco, which means like crazy dude. I kind of brewed this beer just for fun. It was kind of a one-off, and unfortunately, we are already on our third batch. So this is another beer that we have to keep around. So if you guys are gonna be around and you want to start with something super light, this is the perfect beer for you guys to start.
Awesome. All right, and then Hella Coastal, Mario and Jazz, what did you?
Ooh, talking about crazy dude. Right now, my bladder is going crazy right now. Yeah, so so sorry.
Okay. Lots of information. Okay.
No, but Bomba Nights is one of our flagship beers. This is one of the beers that we did in collaboration with Federation when we started with our homebrew batch and we proposed it to them. So this is a coconut. It's called Coquito, which is a small. It's small coconut, but it's a Puerto Rican. My wife is Puerto Rican. We're tied in to Puerto Rican culture through our family and through our friends, and it's a coconut-based stout. Has some chocolate notes from the carafa malt and from the chocolate malt, and it's coming at 8%. And it's I implore you, if you are not a coconut drinker, I think you'll be very happy on the way this finishes with we have some macerated vanilla bean, barrelito rum-soaked oat chips, and about 100 pounds of toasted coconut.
Wow.
That we put in the mash and in the whirlpool, and just a little bit to on the back end just to kind of bump it up a notch on the aroma. So
Sounds super good. And then this is sad because the next beer that you brought is called Oakland Haze, which was in honor of the Oakland A's, which are no longer going to be in Oakland anymore.
That's why we changed the color wave on it,
yeah.
So, we definitely still want to represent Oakland, and it's our hazy IPA. We love the name, so the A's can go.
The beer can stay.
The beer can stay, Oakland Haze. So this is call it like a West Coast hazy IPA, so still has like a little bit of bitterness, but it's not like a Vermont style that is more like juice, so it still feels like you're drinking an IPA. But it has Mosaic, Citra, and Nectaron. So a little bit of citrus notes, some berry, and some stone fruit on a fluffy backbone.
Okay. So who all could listen to these folks for a whole nother 5 hours? Okay. Oh, nobody. Oh, there you go. Okay.
As long as I can use the restroom.
All right, so we have to wrap it up for Mario, or else we would have gone longer. So everybody should head out to the lobby. There's going to be some of the beers that have been poured. What you need to do, oh my gosh, they're so excited. Okay, here we go. You need to hold on to your cup, so get your first drink, hold on to that. These amazing brewers are gonna be out there. They're gonna be able to answer your questions. They're gonna pour you more beer. As long as you hold on to your cup, you only get one. You can try as much as you want, mingle, enjoy, create community. That's what we're all about here at KQED Live. Please join us November 30th. That's our next event. It is the hip hop game show from That's My Word, celebrating 50 years of hip hop. And of course, if you enjoyed this event, I'm always hosting KQED Live food events almost once a month, so join us for our next one. And finally, a big thank you to everyone who was running the booth, everyone who joined us online, who's watching live. You guys, I'm sure, had fun, but not as much fun as we had here today. And always a big thank you to Sarah Rose for putting this on, and to all of you for coming. Thank you so much. Enjoy.